Durante los pasados 30 años, Samuel Barondes ha jugado un papel principal en llevar un enfoque molecular y genético a la neurociencia y a la psiquiatría, acortando así la brecha entre biología molecular y el comportamiento. Su investigación ha sido publicada extensamente y como un talentoso escritor, ha compuesto 3 libros que tratan el papel que la biología molecular juega en las enfermedades mentales, incluyendo su más reciente, Better Than Prozac, Creating the Next Generation of Psychiatric Drugs. Ha aprendido a realizar investigación de biología molecular en los Institutos Nacionales de Salud.
Bienvenidos a un programa especial de Dialogando con la Ciudad de las Ideas. Hoy tendremos a un gran personaje, Sam Barondes. Además es el esposo de esta gran mujer que escribió el libro El cerebro de la mujer, que ustedes ya tuvieron en sus pantallas. Sam Barondes se preocupa sobre qué nos hace prisioneros de la personalidad. Es un neurocientífico que ha estudiado a fondo el cerebro humano, entender realmente y provocar en qué estuvo bien y en qué estuvo mal Sigmund Freud. Para Freud, la personalidad se determina en la infancia. Sam Barondes lo provoca, lo cuestiona, lo critica, lo aprecia y lo desprecia diciendo eso es falso. La juventud y la adolescencia es lo principal que moldea nuestra personalidad. Pero ¿qué nos hace prisioneros de nosotros mismos? Quédese con Sam Barondes para descubrir lo que tiene que decirnos aquí en Diálogo y Dialogando con la Ciudad de las Ideas. How would you define yourself, Sam?
So I'm interested in the 2 parts of people. I'm interested in the fact that we are spiritual beings, that we have a mind, that we think big things, that we have ideas, and yet at the same time we are made up of matter, of molecules, of cells, of organs, of flesh and blood. And so I've been interested all my professional life in the relationship between the material, the molecules, the nerve cells, the brain systems, and how they become integrated into people, how people emerge.
For purpose of the people that are listening to
Yes.
us, what did you study? How did you get there?
Yes, so I started in college with the interest of becoming a psychologist. And in those days, when I was at college, which was at Columbia, the leading thinker in psychology was a man named B.F. Skinner. He was a behaviorist. And the people at Columbia were very strong believers in behaviorism. And I found that initially extremely attractive because behaviorism is quantitative. That is, you can take an experimental animal and you can arrange a schedule of reward, and you can predict how the animal will behave in some simple task like pressing a bar or something like that. So if you give the reward every other time or erratically, the animal presses more than if you give it in a different way. So I liked that. Here was a measurable kind of behavior which you could study in animals and which was quantitative. It was like science. The problem was that the kinds of issues you could deal with seemed very, very limited. And second, that Skinner and all the people like him were completely uninterested in what was going on in the brain. They considered the brain to be what they called a black box. That is, they were interested in input and output. And what went on inside, they said, was impossible to understand and not interesting anyway. So, whereas it seemed to me that what was going on inside was interesting, and although it was really hard to see how one could study it. So being in medical school, I decided that since that didn't work, and since I was interested in biology, that I would become an endocrinologist. And the reason for that was because it was already known that hormones like cortisol or thyroxine have profound effects on behavior. If you have too much cortisone, it affects you in certain ways, etc. So here were simple chemicals that you could get from the, that were made in the body, that you could isolate from the body, that you could also purify and give to people, and they had behavioral effects. So this was something to start with. Obviously the brain was enormously complicated, but at least you had this chemical that you could put in a test tube, and it was pure, and you knew what it was, and you can give a certain amount, and it would have real effects. So I became interested in that. But progressively, then, if you want my whole biography, so because of that, I then I did an internship in endocrinology, and then the way endocrinology works is not just hormones and they change you, but hormones by regulating gene expression. That was an idea that was extremely innovative at the time. What was known at that time? What was known at that time, there was evidence, not a lot, but some, that personality was heritable. Because identical twins have similar personalities and stuff like that. So there was good reason, and people, why are people different? There was good reason to believe that part of the differences between people was inborn. That means it was determined by genes.
And this not?
Well, it is.
Actually, it is.
It is. But, but in those days, how does one study that? I mean,
sure.
We were at, ground zero. We were just So I was not about to try to deal with something so complicated. So I spent a lot of my career working on much more fundamental biological systems. I became interested in how specific genes are involved in making cells stick together. You see, the language of the nervous system is the language of cellular connections. That is, it all comes from the genes. The information for all the cellular connections comes from the genes. But then those genes get translated into proteins, and those proteins tell the cells what to do. And one of the things that the cells are told to do is you connect with this cell and you connect with that cell, and then the other cell connects with this cell, and you make all these connections, and that's what a brain is. So in our little genome, in the 25,000 genes that you and I have, which are not all exactly the same, which is why our personalities are in part different, is the information to make our brain. All the information to make our brain. The fact that we can see, the fact that we can smell, the fact that we can talk. And think of what we can do. I mean, we can talk. Can you imagine? How would you design, 25,000 genes. 25,000 genes do that, and they also make your liver and your kidneys, and and all that stuff. So I became interested in looking for genes in humans that influence behavior, and I made some very small contributions to that, but that field has grown enormously, and now we are beginning to know genes that influence behavior and even influence aspects of personality.
La educación en casa, la formación escolar, la preparación, el medio en que te desenvuelves.
Las amistades, los consejos de la gente, las malas influencias.
El nivel socioeconómico de una persona, o sea, si tienes dinero, si tienes cierta educación, influye bastante en la personalidad.
Y pues te va influyendo todo lo que en el medio en que te desarrollas y como vas viviendo, familia, amigos, escuela, todo.
Esos tipos de factores externos es la gente externa con la que convives, a veces, yo creo, porque en un cierto ambiente llega un joven y llega a un barrio, un vecindario donde hay mucha gente de esa drogadicta, incluso puede cambiar, si se junta con ellos, puede cambiar su personalidad, yo creo que sí.
Tell us a little bit about the book that is coming, your latest research. How much are we really prisoners of our genes? I mean, our personalities, prisoner of our genes, etc.
Yes. So our genes are important. Our genes predispose us to be a certain way. And you mentioned the Minnesota studies, which were fabulous, because what they did was they compared identical and fraternal twins, and they showed that identical twins are much, much more similar than fraternal twins. But then you could argue, well, identical twins may be raised together in a...
No, but they were raised apart.
Ah, that's it. So the great thing about those Minnesota studies is that they also acquired 100 pairs of identical twins that were separated very shortly after they were born. And there are famous studies of one was raised in Germany and the other was raised in Jamaica or whatever. And then you meet them, you bring them back to Minnesota in the lab, and they're both wearing the same kind of shirts, and they have 4 pockets because they like to have...
That's impressive, I know.
Well, and furthermore, I remember that one particular set of twins, which I just read recently about, they had a very interesting trait. Both of them, one was raised, they would always flush the toilet before they used it.
Wow.
A rather specific trait. The twin one flushed the toilet, then he used it. Twin, I mean, how many people do you know who flushed the toilet before they used it? But now, so what did those studies show? Those studies clearly showed that about half of our variation in personality is attributable to our genes.
50%.
About 50% more.
But can we do something to change that?
Well, first, not only can we do something, but something is done to us because it depends on our circumstances. What I've come to learn, based on what I've read, is that indeed development and circumstance, the environment that one's in when one develops, has lasting and important effects on personality too. If you're raised in a comfortable home, in an intellectual home, in one that fosters conscientiousness and intellectual activities, you will have different propensities than if you are raised in one that's quite different. So that is clearly going to affect you. But what it turns out also affects you a great deal are the kids you happen to hang out with. And a lot of that is just accidental. What seems clear is that varieties of circumstances and opportunities that present themselves and niches that one falls into in one's teens and 20s also have bearing on how we behave. I mean, if you decide you want to go to medical school, well, then you learn certain things about how doctors are supposed to behave. And that has an effect on the personality that's formed, and so on. But it seems that by about 30, the windows start closing. And you know, I have a view of it which is not mine alone, and that is that people want to reach a point where they are who they are. So there's a natural tendency to combine one's genetic predisposition with the environment and the experiences and the accidental circumstances. And at some point, you kind of know who you are, and you behave in a predictable way. So you know what to expect from yourself. Other people know what to expect from you. Now, this is not to say that everybody will remain prisoners in the same way. Some people become so comfortable and so set in their ways that they really change very, very little in the course of their lives. Others whose personalities have a lot more openness and inquisitiveness are eager for some change, and I think some change is possible, and some change is possible, you know, through deliberate action. Well, I think that I think you always are constrained by, first of all, the circuitry that your genes gave you, and the circuitry that your genes plus your history, the interaction of your genes and your history sort of laid down. It's like you built your house, and you had wood and you had plans, and it's built, and you can try to remodel it a little bit, but unless you tear it all down, it's going to look pretty much the same. I can tell you that I've changed some, and I'm also pretty much the same. To go to French it's plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose.
Okay.
In other words, yes, I think that I've changed some. I think I've become more self-confident, more accepting of myself, more accepting of other people, and these are all important changes, and they are part of personality. And indeed, personality does, in all of us, show certain maturational changes. They're small, they're progressive, and they're predictable. I mean, it's known that people, as they get older, become somewhat more conscientious, somewhat less impulsive and risk-taking, somewhat more conservative, frequently more agreeable and friendly. A lot of it has to do with the fact that they found their place in the world, but some of it may also be biological, and that is, the system has kind of the drive.
Is there a way that we could accelerate this?
Yes, I think that education and training in personality can actually have significant effects, but only in the way that learning how to play the piano has significant effects. It's not something you can do where you say, I'll sit down for 15 minutes and I'll become a piano player, or I'll practice once a month, and it's something, it's hard. It's really, really hard. So I think change is certainly possible, and I think that programs for significant change can be quite effective, but they are very, very difficult. One of the most important points that I would like to make is that understanding about personality is mostly useful in understanding other people. Understanding yourself is much more difficult, because you as much as people deceive, self-deception is extraordinarily common. We are blind to so many of the things we do. So I think that as a first approximation, if you want to learn about personality, it's really, but you can really learn to see people much more clearly if you have instruction on the characteristics of various personalities, and also the units, the traits, and the categories of behavior to look for.
¿Qué es lo que define desde tu imagen, tus principios, tu comportamiento, ¿no? Pues eso es la personalidad, ¿no?
Pues es alguien que trae por dentro una forma de expresar de cada uno de nosotros, ¿no?
Pues es el perfil de cada quien, cómo es uno y cómo haces las cosas.
Pues es como la carta de presentación del ser humano, ¿no? Con el que se presenta a toda la gente.
Pues personalidad es como quien dice ser uno mismo, ¿no?
I have always been a little bit skeptical about to classify and put stereotypes and etiquettes to people, because then you have the problem that you just want to see them with those eyes, and you actually cannot dialogue with them. How can we solve that problem?
Well, I think that it's clear that there are, first of all, there are, I mean, Jung called them archetypes. There are well-described personality patterns that have been identified and you know, and that psychiatrists and psychologists have been studying for a long time, they're not mutually exclusive, so that it's not like one is a narcissist and only a narcissist, or an avoidant personality and only avoidant personality. There are mixtures of several patterns, but you can, if you become familiar with these patterns, observe them in individuals and pay attention to them and actually learn to sometimes appreciate them and forgive them because, you know, this is how they are, and maybe sometimes change the way you behave to them in a more effective way. So that, I mean, it's not science in the sense that you are in box A and that's what you are.
That's important to know.
But knowing about these patterns
gives you information.
Gives you real information. I think that learning, that point one is that part of your personality is genetic and part of it is environmental.
Okay.
I mean, that may sound obvious, everybody knows it.
No.
But it's really important to understand what that means. Number two, it's important to understand your personality is largely formed by the time you're in your 20s, and that's an important idea to understand. I think it's important to understand that to become an expert in personality, which we all are intuitively, because that's how we make our living, reading other people, it's helpful to gain some education in description of components of personality and patterns of personality. Well, the most dangerous idea that I used in the Brockman book had to do with personality pills. You see, for example, people, there is this drug called Prozac, very well known, which has effects on personality, significant effects on personality. And although nobody has studied these effects long term, doctors give Prozac to people now for 15 or 20 years. And so the dangerous idea is it's okay to do that. I personally think it is, so my dangerous idea is that the practice that is currently being engaged in informally, not based on scientific evidence by doctors, if properly applied by the right doctors, and I have to qualify that because there are lots of wrong doctors out there, can actually have extremely valuable effects on personality and help people considerably in the course of their lives. And indeed, I will deal with that in my new book as well. So what makes it dangerous? It's dangerous only because one doesn't like to give medicines every day for 20 years if one doesn't know what they do. And yet, I think it's actually quite important. And so, when we talk about prisoners of personality, one of the ways to get out of prison is with medication. Not that I'm a big fan of, like, everybody should be taking pills and stuff like that. We know almost nothing about the right kind of pills that can affect people in the right kind of way. As we learn more about the genes, as we learn more about the brain, as we learn more about medications, we will have better resources to make useful changes in personality.
Thank you very, very much.
My great pleasure.
I have learned a lot. You have made me think. I came with a lot of questions. I go with more questions.
Good.
And that's great because we will have you in Puebla and it will be an honor to have you there.
It is.
Thanks for your time and for your hospitality.
My great pleasure.
¿Qué les pareció Sam Barondes? A la gente que le interese su trabajo y quiera saber mucho más de Sam Barondes, podrá leer un libro extraordinario que habla del estado en el cual se encuentran nuestros genes, The Mood Genes. ¿Por qué a veces somos enojones, a veces somos felices, a veces somos agresivos, a veces somos nobles? Sam Barondes es una persona que nos ha provocado haciéndonos entender que tenemos que cuestionarnos todo lo que pensamos. Él te pregunta, ¿tú piensas que piensas lo que piensas? La gente que esté interesada en conocerlo a fondo de viva voz. Acuda por favor al Festival de la Ciudad de las Ideas del 6 al 8 de noviembre en Puebla. Y recuerde, gratitud a los patrocinadores, a las empresas socialmente responsables que apuestan en las ideas para transformar a México. Pero sobre todo gratitud a ustedes. Este programa está hecho para ustedes, con ustedes y por ustedes, porque apostamos en Proyecto 40 que las ideas empoderan al ciudadano y transforman al mundo. Muchas gracias.
La Ciudad de las Ideas, un festival sin precedentes, agradece el apoyo a las siguientes empresas socialmente responsables.